Well, look, the deal calls for every 10 hostage release to extend another day. So I'm hopeful this is not the end. It's going to continue, but we don't know. And but I get a sense that all the players in the region, even the neighbors who aren't and have been directly involved now, are looking for a way to end this so the hostages are all released and Hamas is completely, how can I say it, no longer in control of any portion of Gaza.
I can't tell if he's just trying to choose his words carefully or he just suspends thought for a moment. I can't. Yeah. That's POTUS who is speaking about this weird deal. We got a lot to get into because we got China, we got this, and I need an expert to explain to me the hostage to terrorist math here. Joining us, senior fellow at America First Policy Institute, our very good friend Stephen Yates, and you can find him on X at Yates. I keep want to call it Twitter at YatesComms, and also he's chair of China Policy Initiative there. I want to get into some of those headlines that I have, Stephen, but can you explain to everybody? I'm trying to understand the math here. So the temporary ceasefire deal calls for 60 terrorists to be released back to Hamas in Gaza in exchange for 20 hostages. And Hamas has already said that some of the babies and the little kids that they have in custody, they're not going to allow those, all of them to leave. Who approved that? How does that ratio work?
I have a very, very hard time with this. Of course, if you are a family member and you have someone who's immediately involved, you are close to this situation, and there's nothing that I can say that can cover what they're dealing with. But if you take a step back, and you have to, if you're a serious leader, you have to say, these are innocent victims versus actual murderous rapist criminals, some of whom maimed themselves in attempts trying to kill innocent people before. I wouldn't exchange anything for any of those people. And I hate to say it, but I mean, really, I don't know who can come up with this number. Really, I don't know why we wouldn't say you release all of the innocents or you are done. Yeah. And I'm not going to listen to any protesters anywhere. You take innocents, moms, grandmoms, daughters, kids, you release them all or you are over. And I just don't think there's any talk beyond that. Otherwise, it just invites more. And even with this deal, they released 10 of them or 20 of them and they get 10 more days of a respite. I mean, that is fantasy math. And it's just I can't understand anybody who engages any of it.
I mean, it seems like they're trying to drag this out as long as possible.
Well, speaking of dragging it out long as possible, how long did it take to get one freaking American out? How is an American president not putting an American hostage first as a demand for any let up in any of this? He was already equivocating on moral equivalence between the Israeli position and the Hamas position before any American had been released. So there's a lot of this that really doesn't add up. But I think most of your audience probably is already saying, well, we expect no less out of Joe. I mean, this is the guy that gave billions of dollars to the Iranians to get a few people back. And it led directly to this kind of an assault. And so, yeah, I mean, this is the guy that failed Afghanistan withdrawal, leaving billions of material behind. So that's just par for the course. But this is getting really maddening, if you ask me.
And you mentioned, too, we're talking with our friend Stephen Yates, you mentioned the first American that was released, this 9-year-old. And I wish they could all be released. And I also wish that the Biden administration hadn't routinely acted with such impropriety that you have to mention that now the great aunt of the first hostage that's to be released also spent like nearly $1 million on Hunter Biden's art and received this prestigious appointment to this like American preservation thing from Joe Biden. And that's the first person that was released, which obviously is going to weigh up on other people's hearts to think, well, because we don't have connections, when do our family members get released?
Yeah, people who are in these positions, I mean, you just have to understand their mind's going to go everywhere. What would it take? What angle do I have to play to get my son, daughter, wife, brother, sister, whatever, out of this horrible, horrible situation? And yeah, that's going to come up. But you know what? What would it take for any journalist worth their salt when talking about a person being released? Not, maybe also include they watched their mother and father get murdered before their eyes. I mean, just, put a little bit more context into exactly what is being exchanged for what. How much did they cover people smiling and waving, sort of Stockholm syndrome like, versus saying that these animals, and that's what they were, pure animals, and that's a disgrace to animals. They did this awful stuff that these kids, yes, they're released now, and praise God that they are, but they're going to live with serious trauma courtesy of these beasts.
Yeah. Talking with our very good friend Stephen Yates at YatesComs on X. So I saw this over Thanksgiving. This is one of the things that was brought up, of course, at the Thanksgiving table. Chinese scientists find a new bat coronavirus linked to pangolins that has the same freak mutation as COVID. And then there's apparently a new respiratory illness surging in China. Number one, I don't trust anything coming out of that country for nothing. Number two, they're still messing with the bad stuff.
Well, at this point, I don't know why anyone is going to China. And, how about now that we're in supposedly a political re-election cycle, how about that question back from 2020? Should there be a travel ban on people coming from a country that does not have quality control, does not respect its own people, that now has a whole generation dying of something called white lung? I mean, good grief. We've already had COVID, we've had fentanyl, and now we've got something else coming. At what point would reasonable people say, this is not a place to go for your foreign exchange experience, your tourism, and maybe some comings and goings ought to be curtailed for a time?
I can't believe anybody would go there for any kind of tourism at all. I'd be afraid you wouldn't come back.
Well, I sure wouldn't.
Oh, no,
but,
you wouldn't. They hate you. They don't like you. They ran you out of Radio Free Asia. I have to ask you about this as well. So they've acquired a global network of ports, and this was a headline that I saw. It's like all these different maritime paths. I think you and I talked about Panama. In fact, didn't we also haven't we talked about how they control the Panama Canal?
Oh, yeah.
I think you were on before when we talked about that. They apparently now control the entire network of these very, very vital ports all around the world, whether it goes through, you're going through like Suez, you're going through, what I think it's off the coast of India. There's all different types of ports that they control. How bad is that for people who aren't following this and they don't appreciate the reality of it?
Well, number one, they have been lied to by the best experts money can buy for a long time to suggest that the Communist Party of China is just like anybody else. They put their pants on one leg at a time. They're just trying to get food on the table for the next generation. They're just like us. But no, they're not. And it turns out they use civilian tools for strategic and military purposes. In fact, it's their civilian fishing vessels that harass more military and Coast Guard vessels on the high seas than actual Chinese military vessels. And the same will be said for these other things. Now, I would like to believe that we live in the world of Adam Smith and that an invisible hand can balance a lot of these different kinds of things by supply and demand. But I think it's time that we have to look at some things as being strategically vital to our way of life. Ports have to be one of them. Borders should be. I don't know why that's shocking. But whether it's airports or seaports, all of these entry-exit points and things that can crush our way of life, we can't think of those as just being at the mercy of the highest bidder, especially a bidder that we give trillions of dollars to every year by way of imbalanced trade and otherwise stealing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very, very good point. And I guess one thing, you think about that stuff. I didn't think about it, but then I was reading that they acquire another port. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's like how many now do they control? In addition to that, they're testing us still in the South China Sea. This is from Reuters via Yahoo News. China and U.S. exchange accusations over U.S. vessel in South China Sea. I'm going to immediately blame China because when are they not shady? Basic question.
Well, also, when are we going to stop calling it the South China Sea? I mean, this is supposed to
What
be in
should
English.
we call it? Yes, correct me on that. What should we call it?
We should call it like call it the Southeast Asian Sea, or call it the Indonesian Sea. Give it a freebie to somebody. I don't care, but don't call it the South China Sea. All that does is reinforce this false narrative that aspiring peacemakers, missionaries, and businessmen sort of say, oh, well, they call, and even in the Chinese language, they don't call it the South China Sea. They call it the South Sea. And so, I mean, this is basically what English translators have screwed up and won't unscrew up. But maybe we should stop calling it theirs. That's kind of a problem, confusing people, because it goes hundreds and hundreds of miles away from what the Chinese continental mainland
It's in international
is.
waters.
It's insane.
Yeah, I like the South Sea, just the South Sea. Or give it as a freebie to somebody else. Or, we could name it, after Taiwan. That'd probably make them angrier.
That would be awesome.
I think that would work out incredibly well. Stephen Yates, always so good to see you, my friend. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving at Yates Comms on X. I keep wanting to say Twitter. Thank you, as always, so much. Good to see you.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.
Of course, you too.